Welcome back to The Rabbit Hole. If you're new to our podcast, great to have you. Here, no topic is out of bounds. We dig deep, questioning and researching everything on an ongoing quest for truth, comprehension and wisdom. It's your girl, Mrs. Naya Noble. As usual, we dangle the carrot regarding all sorts of topics and encourage you to delve into your own continuous research. Hit the like button, share and subscribe before we get into it. Vaccines. This seems to be all everyone is talking about at the moment. Before we get into it, disclaimer. I am not a doctor, a physician, or a scientist. I am, however, a conscientious and learned individual with freedom of speech. And whilst we still have that liberty, I will exercise it through an impartial evaluation of the COVID-19 vaccination. Disclaimer number 2. I am not an anti-vaxxer or any other ism, schism or phobia associated or placed upon people who challenge or somewhat disagree with the status quo. I am, however, going to try and look at this subject with as much objectivity as I possibly can and put my personal opinions to the side. Let's get started. This week, beginning the 7th of December 2020, the news worldwide has been covering the 90-year-old woman from Coventry in England who became the first person in the world to receive the Pfizer vaccine against COVID-19 outside of clinical trial conditions. So what is the RNA vaccine? How is it made? How does it work? So many vaccines, like those for influenza, otherwise known as the flu, use an inactivated virus that is destroyed by heat or chemicals like formaldehyde so that it can elicit an immune response without infecting you. Other vaccines, like those for measles, mumps and rubella, use a live attenuated virus that is cultivated in such a way that it makes the virus weak and unable to hurt you, but is still able to train your immune system to fight it. The Pfizer RNA vaccine, on the other hand, is completely new and revolutionary, to say the least. It uses a sequence of genetic RNA material produced in a lab that, when injected into your body, must invade your cells and hijack your cell's protein, making ribosomes. This produces a viral component that subsequently trains your immune system to fight the virus. So in essence, the RNA vaccine is programmed to make your cells produce the coronavirus's infamous spike protein. So the spikes that you've been seeing in the pictures, essentially the word corona in Latin means crown. It has a crown-like appearance, and that is what the RNA is programmed to make your body reproduce. So in many ways, the vaccine almost behaves like an RNA virus itself, except that it hijacks your cells to produce the parts of the virus, like the spike protein, rather than the whole virus. Some messenger RNA vaccines being developed are said to be self-amplifying. Now, this means they encode not only the protein antigen of interest to elicit an immune response, but also produce their own RNA-dependent RNA polymerase so that they can force the cell to replicate more copies of it. So it can be said that a self-amplifying messenger RNA vaccine is an artificially created self-replicating virus. Now, there are said to be unique and unknown risks to messenger RNA vaccines, including the possibility that they generate strong type 1 interferon responses. Now, this could lead to inflammation and autoimmune conditions. On the other hand, the advantages of having a messenger RNA vaccine is that it can be mass produced cost effectively and on a large scale, which is necessary for the worldwide vaccination efforts that's needed for this pandemic. Also, it does not require an uninterrupted cold storage. Now, this usually makes it challenging for distribution of vaccines to poorer countries and rural areas with unreliable refrigeration at point of care. Nonetheless, the fact remains that a messenger RNA vaccine has never before been brought to market for human patients. So the hype surrounding the Pfizer and other RNA vaccines require us to take not one, but two leaps of faith. That being that it works for a never before seen virus and in a never before seen way. So what are the causes for concern? Why are people skeptical? And is there any truth in some of the rumours circulating on social media? We're going to break this down into 5 points, starting with length of trials. Clearly, there has been a short duration of study in regards to this vaccine. It doesn't really allow a realistic estimation of what the late effects could be. So traditional vaccines usually take up to 2 years to develop and are tested over a period of 10 to 15 years. This vaccine in comparison has been developed and tested within a year. So we don't truly know if there are going to be adverse effects and what they might be. When the Pfizer vaccine was approved in the UK, Professor Clive Page, President-elect of the British Pharmacology Society, said this: "It's important to note that in this case, speed was the result of focused and sustained efforts in research, development and regulation. No safety shortcuts were taken. And as with all vaccines in the UK, its safety will be continually monitored as it is rolled out to the public via the Yellow Card scheme, where information about potential side effects and adverse reactions are monitored and evaluated." Now, it is true that the swine flu vaccine pandemics has been associated with small increase in narcolepsy in children and young people. The vaccine was given to some healthy children and some young people particularly vulnerable to the flu in the UK in the late 2009. Then studies within Finland emerged potentially linking this jab to sleep paralysis. So things like this in history are making people think, well, maybe we'll go to the back of the queue and kind of see what happens because we don't quite know yet what is going to happen. Going into the science of things, there is a thing called antibody-dependent amplification. This is the formation of so-called non-neutralizing antibodies, which can lead to an exaggerated immune reaction, especially when the test person is confronted with the real wild virus after vaccination. This so-called antibody-dependent amplification, otherwise known as ADE, has long been known from experiments with corona vaccines in cats, for example. In the course of these studies, all cats that initially tolerated vaccination, well, they died after catching the wild virus. So put simply, an antibody is made by the body's immune system and attaches to something on the surface of the virus, usually attacking it or rendering it harmless. So like we said before, typical vaccines that work by giving the body a harmless version of the protein on the surface of the virus so it can make these antibodies would speed up the body's ability to fight the infection if it gets the real disease later. You can get these antibodies from having had the infection, having been vaccinated with the old style vaccinations, or having been treated with blood plasma from people who've had the infection which contain them, so that their blood would have the white blood cells in order to give you the antibodies. Now, non-neutralizing antibodies are antibodies that can attach to these proteins on the surface of the virus but don't actually kill or harm them. It has been found that in some cases in cats, they may actually help the infection take hold. The argument against this is that antibody-dependent amplification, ADE, is a very rare example of these non-neutralizing antibodies making the infection worse. As well as some observations in cats, however, there is solid evidence of this happening in humans with dengue fever. Despite this, scientists are saying there isn't much evidence that ADE is a problem in human coronavirus infections. They're saying ADE happening with a different disease in a non-human animal does not indicate it would happen in humans with COVID-19 vaccines. Stick with me with the science for a minute. So the Pfizer vaccine does contain polyethylene glycol, otherwise known as PEG. Now, 70% of people develop antibodies against this substance. This means that many people can develop allergic, potentially fatal reactions to the vaccination. So it is true that the Pfizer vaccine does contain PEG. This substance is used in some vaccines, but is apparently safe in the quantities that are in the vaccines. It's also safely used at higher concentrations as laxatives and has a range of other uses from food to cosmetics, apparently. It is true that in rare cases, people can have an allergic reaction to PEG, but these are usually to medications where the PEG is the main ingredient, for example, in solutions to prepare for colonoscopies. In the vaccine, PEG is just an excipient. So not an active ingredient that makes the vaccine work, but present in a small amount to allow the manufacturer for storage of the vaccine. So a bit like a preservative in our food. At the time of this podcast, the MHRA have advised on the precautionary basis that people with a significant history of allergic reactions do not get the vaccine. This is because 2 NHS workers, National Health Service for those in different countries, with a history of serious allergies have had a reaction to the injection. Case of infertility. It has been going around on social media that the vaccine will cause infertility in women. So is there any truth in this? Let's look at the science again. The vaccinations, like we've said, are expected to produce antibodies against spike proteins. However, spike proteins also contain sinusitin homoglotous proteins, which are essential for the formation of the placenta in mammals such as us humans. So the COVID-19 spike protein, which the Pfizer vaccine causes an immune response against, also trains the body to attack sinusitin 1, a protein in the placenta, which people are fearing could lead to infertility in women. In argument against this, scientists are saying the spike protein on the COVID-19 virus and the protein that makes up the placenta have only a small amount in common. Almost certainly, they say, not enough for the immune system to attack the placenta. The virology professor Ian Jones at the University of Reading has said the spike protein and the sinusitin 1 don't look similar enough for the same antibodies that the body would create as an immune response to the vaccine to bind or to attack the sinusitin. The government are currently saying that the Pfizer vaccine has not yet been assessed in pregnancy, so it has been advised that until more information is available, those who are pregnant should not have the vaccine, similar to the fact that they're also not administering it to children. So although we haven't had years to watch what happens after people get this vaccine. This doesn't mean there's any evidence this vaccine might impact fertility, they're saying. However, it does just mean that there hasn't been an explicit study, which is basically because we haven't had the time. Regarding concerns about this vaccine, we're going to lastly look at the government and manufacturing indemnity. So an article in the Sun newspaper states that manufacturers of a potentially fast-tracked COVID-19 vaccine would be protected from civil liability if the vaccine is later found to cause harm. So UK law does not usually allow the sale or supply of medicinal products, including vaccines, without marketing authorization, product licensing, in other words. However, this doesn't apply when the sale or supply of a medicinal product is temporarily authorized in response to a pathogenic agent such as the virus which causes COVID-19. So the government can authorize the supply of an unlicensed COVID-19 vaccine, although let's just be clear, unlicensed doesn't necessarily mean untested. So any COVID-19 vaccine rolled out to the public, unlicensed or not, will still have gone through clinical trials. Licensing usually takes place after the vaccine has undergone various trials and can typically take weeks or even months to obtain. So any decision to fast-track unlicensed vaccines would be a decision made nationally and not by individual suppliers. Listen very carefully here. Manufacturers cannot generally be sued in the civil courts for the consequences resulting from the use of any unlicensed product or a new use of a licensed product that a national licensing authority is recommending in order to deal with certain specific health threats, according to a government consultation document. So just break that down. They cannot be sued. They cannot be held liable for any harm that this vaccine causes to anyone because it's unlicensed. Even after getting their licensing and it's deemed as new, you cannot sue them. They're not held responsible. There is no repercussions made for them in that loophole if something happens to you after taking this vaccine. The fact that it hasn't been licensed is because it's still within the trial period. It is far too soon to know of any repercussions that can happen or can result from this virus, and they know that. So what they've said is take it at your own risk, basically. So what actual testing was done, particularly as we have been told by mainstream media that this has a 95% efficacy rate? So about the 95%. The phase 3 trials of the Pfizer vaccine involved 42,000 people, about half of whom got the experimental vaccine and the rest got a placebo. So placebo is basically not the vaccine. It would be, sugar water or something that won't fight off the vaccine. But these people in the trial wouldn't know whether they got the placebo or they got the vaccine in order for scientists to research how effective the actual vaccine is. In total, out of the 42,000 people, 170 people fell ill with COVID-19. Now, only 8 of the 170 were in the vaccine group. 162 had received the placebo. So around 5% of cases were in the vaccine group, which is where the 95% figure comes from. The World Health Organization feel that this is a very healthy number, and they said they would have been happy with 50%. Now, does it protect everyone? The answer is no. In the trials, out of 20,000 people who were given the vaccine, so in the vaccine group, 8 people actually caught COVID-19 and became seriously ill. Another question, another grey area regarding the vaccine. It's a 2-shot vaccine. So what happens if people miss the second shot? Is a single shot still protective? 2 shots are needed, and the second shot is required to attain immunity. The gap between doses in the trial ranged from 19 and 42 days. Only 2% of people in the trial missed their second dose. So it isn't entirely clear what happens under those circumstances. Does the vaccine stop people from catching and transmitting the virus? The answer is they still don't know. The vaccine is supposed to stop the person who has taken the vaccine from getting ill. However, they do not know if it stops said person from giving it to other people or actually catching the virus. The trial was designed to test for symptomatic COVID-19 and confirmed infections with the virus. Assessing whether the vaccine prevents transmission, which is probably a prerequisite for attaining vaccine-induced herd immunity, is much harder. But Pfizer says it is carrying out more studies on this important question and will release information soon. So who knows? Who knows? Has the full data from the trial been published yet? No, it hasn't. But apparently there's nothing sinister about that. Companies can release news to the market as soon as they have it. Essentially, it's still in the trial period and it's unlicensed. They don't have all the information, so that's why it hasn't been released. Which brings us to the discussion about it being mandatory. So, most Western countries, including the UK, are not making the vaccine mandatory. However, there is talk of keeping those people who do not choose to take the vaccine in lockdown. There's been talk of the non-vaxxers not being able to return to work, leisure activities, or even travel if they choose not to take it. Now, the issue here is, how can those who choose not to take it be a risk to those who have taken it? Surely those who have taken it are supposed to be immune. So the so-called non-vaxxers should be of no threat to them or the wider public and should be able to continue life as normal. How can those who haven't taken the vaccine be of threat to those who have? The vaccine is supposed to build immunity, is it not? Food for thought. Will the COVID-19 virus mutate? And what does this mean for the RNA vaccine? So every virus mutates. It's part of the virus life cycle. Those shifts and changes aren't always a big deal. The new coronavirus is an RNA virus in itself, a collection of genetic material packed inside a protein shell. RNA viruses like the flu and measles are more prone to change and mutations compared to DNA viruses such as herpes, smallpox, and HPV. COVID is no exception, and over the past few months, it has been mutating, but the virus has mutated at a very slow pace. And when it does mutate, the new copies aren't far off from the original virus. Having said that, a new study in an institute in Florida suggests the new coronavirus has mutated into a variant that is more infectious. The mutation that they've named D614G mutation occurred on the spike protein, the part of the virus that helps to bind and fuse to our cells. So the D614G mutation makes it easier for the virus to infect our cells. That being said, it's very rare that a virus could mutate to be more aggressive. If anything, RNA viruses are more likely to mutate into a weaker version. So in reaction to that, scientists are saying the vaccine will most likely work against variants of the mutation. It will most likely protect people against the vast majority of circulating COVID-19 strains for the foreseeable mutations. So regardless of it mutating, they're saying that this vaccine will and should protect people. So, Rabbit Hole family, we hope that that's helped. We hope that we've answered some of your questions. We hope that we've put some of the concerns out there to the test. We've looked at the science. We've looked at what the scientists say. So you can actually go away and make an informed decision. More often than not, the mainstream media has one narrative. It doesn't necessarily tell you all the facts. I mean, those of you that live in the UK, we've lived through the Brexit scenario where one thing was said in the media and then in reality, a lot of it couldn't be followed through. So, make up your own decision. We have a previous video, it's the reset video, and in that it covers pharmacia, the origins of the pharmaceuticals and the pharmaceutical industry. Please, please, please give that a watch. It's so insightful. We know that the pharmaceutical industry is a multi-trillion-dollar industry that often puts profits ahead of humanity. The majority of us out there have a good and effective immune system. So if you eat, drink, and exercise right, this is the best way to keep yourself healthy, people. And this is what's going to fight off any virus and any disease. God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. In fact, fear will cause the disease. Fear is what will make you ill. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. Your body is a temple. Build it up and treat it as such. Treat it like a temple. We have every natural resource, which is always better than anything synthetic. Natural resources keep us fit and healthy. Ultimately, do your own research, know the truth for yourself so you're able to make an informed decision on what's best for you and your family. The truth will set you free. Dear friend, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you. Peace, abundance, and security. Stay tuned. Thanks for listening.